Welcome back to Bnei HaNeviim. We're here today doing our first of many to come, review and recommendations of books to keep us advancing and growing throughout the winter. Actually in perfect and fitting theme for today's times, Shovavim. The parashas of Shmot, Vayera, Bo, Beshalach, Yitro, Mishpatim. Today I'm going to be recommending the book Yesod Tzion by Rabbi Ben-Tzion Mutsafi on the topic of Shovavim. This is a book I finished last year, and it was an amazing book, and I thought it's a fitting book to recommend this time of year, right now, while we're in these parashas. Rabbi Ben-Tzion Mutsafi, he's one of the elder Sephardic rabbis in Israel today. He actually grew up with the previous generation of Godolim, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, the Baba Sali, Rabbi Ezra Tzion, even his father was like a big rabbi from Iraq, and he actually grew up around all these great sages, and obviously now he's become a sage in his own right. In this book, he's actually focusing on this topic of Shovavim, which deals with a lot on the topic of sexual morality and keeping yourself focused and not letting your desires take hold of you while you're building yourself up spiritually. Shovavim is generally a time that's thought of, and I think there's a lot of maybe a misconception, but it's thought of mostly as a time of fasting and praying a lot and doing a lot of things to sort of rectify any sins or flaws that you have in yourself, especially in this area of the Yesod. But we're going to see actually that he talks about things that are much more practical and relevant according to our level in this generation. It's funny, he actually mentioned in one of his lectures that I listened to that it was actually Rabbi Ovadia Yosef who actually inspired him to write all his Seforim. One Sukkot, when he went to visit him in his sukkah, Rabbi Ovadia was mentioning how there's so many great sages who unfortunately, after they pass away, their Torah passes away with them, and he was bemoaning the fact that it's such a loss that these rabbis didn't write down their Torah to pass it on to the future generations so that they can learn from it and embody it. So that's actually one of the things that inspired Rabbi Ben-Tzion Mutsafi to start writing his books and releasing his material. So let's start off with the externals, and we'll work our way into the book and see what this book's all about. So here you have the book, very sleek and elegant, black cover, floral border design, gold shiny text, very heavy, thick book, very high quality. It's something that, like, when I got it shipped over to me, I thought this was like, wow, this is like something you'd pick up at like an ancient library, like this tome of wisdom that you picked up off the shelves. Basically, the format is you'll have like the main halacha here, or like the main point that he's trying to discuss, and down here he'll actually go into the different, he'll sort of expand on the idea and give examples and stories that will illustrate what's being spoken about. So we'll start saying that this book is fully in Hebrew, so it will, obviously be more accessible to those who are at least have some grasp in the Hebrew language and are able to understand it. And but what's nice is that even though it's in Hebrew, all the concepts are practical, and he'll bring it down to our level, and you'll be able to understand everything as long as you have the basic grasp of Hebrew. In all, the book runs about 440 pages. What's interesting is that actually the introduction is very poetic. It's something I'm not sure how many books you'll see this sort of style in, but the book's introduction, the author actually starts at probably 6 to 8 pages, and it's all very poetic and very flowing. The way he does it, he definitely put time and effort into making it and crafting the introduction like this. But it basically goes into what the book is all about and what it's going to be discussing, and the importance of the topics being discussed in this book, and how central it is to this time period of Shovavim. And what I'll do is I can even give you a little bit of a taste of what this sounds like when you read it. יסד ארץ על מכוניה, את כלי החצר, את עמודיה ואת אדניה, בתיקון מעשה בניה, כי רחל מבכה על בניה, והנה שבים הרחוקים אל אדוניה, וגם אם חטאו וקלקלו כאנשי סדום ועמורה ושכניה, בימי השובבים היו מתקדשים ומטהרים ועוסקים בתורה המזככת ומטהרת הנשמה מעווניה ומטהרת הנפש החטאת מכל פגמיה. So you see, it's like sort of like a lot of rhyming, but he actually interweaves all these concepts into a very beautiful introduction, something I don't think you'll see in many books out there. The book is very source-based. You're going to see lots of sources thrown at you: Zohar, Kabbalah, Midrash, Halacha, Tanakh. You're going to see all interwoven into this one topic, and how to sort of build yourself in this area of life during these weeks. It really shows his mastery of the entire Torah. Like, he has encyclopedic knowledge of all the sources, and he brings it all into one book. At the same time, it's very practical and down to earth, even though if you're not overly familiar with Kabbalistic topics and all these mystical areas, he brings it down so that you can understand it. You can understand the impact of the world on us in this area of life and how our actions can impact on the world. And it's very practical. It'll give you advice that you can follow. It's not, fasting 100 days to fix a certain avera you did or something like that. He understands that, in this generation, we're not necessarily on this level. He knows that, just like most of the rabbis don't recommend it. So it's very practical, and you can implement a lot of these ideas into your life. At the same time, you'll see a lot of first-hand encounters, stories that Rabbi Mutsafi saw as he was growing up, and as he lived amongst all these great rabbis, and to see how they composed themselves and what they did during these times, and how seriously they took these weeks for their spiritual development. And I think there's a lot of musar and a lot of great points you can take for yourself. The book is divided into 3 gates, as they're called, or chapters are called in a lot of Torah literature. 3 gates. So actually the first gate's dealing with the days of Shovavim and what it's all about, what the purpose is, what's the source for these days. The second gate deals with preventing yourself, damaging yourself in this area of life, in the Yesod, in your sexual morality, and like keeping your desires in check and making sure you don't go overboard with certain things. And the third gate has to do with fixing up what's already been damaged. And we're going to see that this theme sort of runs through the entire Torah. It's not something that just relates to today. It's something that has been around since man was around. And at the end of the day, you want to fix that up so that it's not preventing you from growing spiritually. So the concept of Shovavim being a time period of focus on this area of life really took hold with the writings of the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, one of basically the greatest Kabbalists who we know of, and we have his writings today. And he actually writes that these days, these 6 weeks, are focused on fixing up our desires and our spirituality and in this area of Yesod. And he's the one who sort of brought this to light and said, okay, this is what we have to do. This is how you fix up all these areas that are holding you back from growing spiritually. Historically, this period of time was very much associated with fasting, rigorous fasting, and doing tshuva and repentance and davening a lot. Today we understand that we're not at that level. Greater rabbis in previous generations would fast like the whole week, obviously half-day fast. This is a concept that's very hard for us to grasp, and it might not even have the greatest effect on us should we practice it. So in this first shar, he basically goes through what's it all about, who is fasting really for, what's the purpose of fasting, and if it's going to bring you back and it's not going to really do you any good, then why do it anyways? So he gives you really a lot of different tips and areas to work on besides the fasting. And he says the fasting, you leave it to the big guns. As a historical context, just for these days of Shovavim, these weeks are specifically focused on, like I said, focusing on the area of sexual morality and making sure that your desires are in check. The Arizal basically writes that these weeks, we're supposed to use them to fix up a lot of the sins that were done in the first 20 generations of mankind, from Adam until the generation of the flood, to the Tower of Babel, to the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. A lot of their detriments and what brought them to be destroyed was their immodesty and their immorality in these areas of sexuality. And for us to focus on that and build that, we have to focus on basically what he says is learning Torah and fixing our middah, our character traits and character development, because those are the things that really affect the area of the Brit Milah and the Yesod. Another thing on the topic of fasting is he mentions that not everyone who wants to fast should fast. He really mentioned that fasting is more for the people who've already fixed like every area of their life. These guys are like angels, and they're just trying to like get rid of like any small smidgen of spiritual impurity that's holding them back. So once you've perfected yourself, he mentions then start thinking about fasting and all these things. But for now, focus on your eating, not overindulging in eating, not wasting your time. That's a big one he focus on in this book. Making sure you're learning Torah and like making sure you're well aware of different areas of Allah. At the same time, he does make sure to point out that fasting in itself is not an end unto itself, just to say like I did it. it is a means for tshuva. The Rambam actually writes that it's, fast where you're not actually repenting and like soul searching for what you have to fix up. You just wasted your time. When you are fasting, make sure you're doing the right things. You're in the right state of mind. And we have a few different fasts throughout the year, so use those opportunities to do the repentance you have to do and use them wisely, and don't just let it be a day of no eating, because that, why'd you starve yourself? In the second shar, he's going to be dealing a lot with preventing the pgam brit and not overstepping your boundaries in sexuality and sexual immorality. He starts off with, again, Talmud Torah. The Rambam famously says, someone who has like improper thoughts and lewd thoughts throughout the whole day, it just means his mind is devoid of wisdom. So obviously you want to focus on fill yourself with wisdom, and once you're filled with wisdom, you'll know when to enjoy the pleasures of life and when to keep them in check. After Talmud Torah, he goes into a section of protecting your eyes, making sure you're looking at the right things, not looking at the wrong things, keeping your thoughts in check, and making sure you're in control of your thoughts, and not that your thoughts sort of just jump in on your mind and take over. It really gives you a lot of tips and how to do this and how to prevent yourself from looking at things you shouldn't be looking at. And it also goes into the importance of it, because if you don't know how important it is, why would you spend the time doing it? After that, interestingly enough, and this sort of threw me off guard, but actually the biggest section of this section of preventing pgam brit is shmirat halashon, your tongue, and making sure you don't say any improper speech, and making sure you don't speak negatively about people. I personally, at first, didn't see the connection. Like, what does this have to do with what we're talking about here? But apparently, this is a very important and key aspect of Shmirat Yesod and Shmirat Brit, is making sure that your speech is in check and you're making sure you're not speaking negatively. And an interesting point he mentioned is that besides ridding your vocabulary of negative words, even when you're speaking to, let's say, a colleague or even like a child, let's say, get off the table or you will get hurt should you jump from it. You don't say you're going to get hurt if you fall. You should actually say, don't jump off the table so you don't get hurt. Something so simple as that, he said you should try to pay attention to that and try to build a more positive vocabulary and speech. Another example we actually see on a day-to-day basis is in the Kriyat Shema, when there are certain areas in the Shema where you have to keep a little space in between two specific words. Specifically when there's a mem at the end of one word and the next word is ot or et. The reason for that is that you don't want to slur your words so that it sounds like you're saying met or dead, literally. So we see that even in the Shema, there is a focus of a positive speech and positive vocabulary. You don't want to say words that have a negative connotation. Ukshartim otam, you shall tie them on your arm with regards to the tefillin. Ukshartim otam, you want to keep a little space there so you sort of cut out that possibility for negative speech in the Shema. And it's funny that actually today in a lot of positive psychology, positive thinking books, you'll actually see that same principle in those books where you don't want to say negative words. You want to cut out negative words from your vocabulary because even that affects your mental state and your perception of life. After that, he goes into a lot of different areas in middah development and perfecting your character traits with like anger, sadness, how to get rid of these traits from your life so that's not affecting you and it doesn't bring you down, and you might imagine would affect your ability to control yourself and your desires. And when people are depressed, they do certain things, or when they're angry, they do certain things. That is a big focus in this section. After that, he goes a lot into eating habits and sleeping habits and making sure that you're even mindful of how you're eating and how you're sleeping, so that even that doesn't affect your biology and your ability to cope with different situations, and making sure you're in tip-top shape to wake up in the morning and live your life. One final point in this section is actually a lot of Sephardim will like this, as segulot, that will deal with helping out with the area of Brit Milah and your Yesod. A lot of minhagim that Sephardim have on the night before the Brit Milah of a child, they'll actually get together and learn certain parts of the Zohar. There's certain prayers you can say, and he brings in all the different minhagim, but you can read it on there. You find a lot of interesting things to help out in this area. The third shar is how to fix up the pgam, like the different damages that are already done with the Brit Milah, and protecting our sexual morality and our desires. He goes through a lot of the areas that we're already doing in life, like keeping Shabbat and like the holidays and prayers and how to say brachot properly. He'll go through every single one of these mitzvot, and he'll show that they already have an aspect that they can fix up the damage that has been done. It's something that can be focused on. You're already doing these things. He'll teach you how to do this in a more refined way, saying brachat properly with the proper kavanot, having the proper oneg on Shabbat, having the right mindset, having the right simcha and happiness in the holidays. These are all things that already inherently have an aspect to fix up this area. Again, that's to take our minds off the fact that, the only way to fix it is through fasting and doing all these different difficult feats. Again, Talmud Torah is right here in the forefront of this entire Sefer, filling your mind up with Hashem's wisdom, the wisdom of God, Torah. And once you fill yourself up with that, it'll take away any negative thoughts that you already have, and you'll be able to overcome a lot of the advances your Yetzer Hara makes at you in this specific area. You won't find as much of a challenge as you would have had you not learned all this Torah and all these different tactics to help yourself out here and guard yourself. And finally, the book just ends off with a sort of summary of all the different lessons that you learned, so you can go through bullet points. You don't have to, if you're looking for something specific, you'll have like sort of a glossary at the end where to find everything you're looking for. That's basically where the book ends. Very amazing material to go over, especially during these 6 weeks of Shovavim. Like I said, it's a very practical book. It'll systematically go through all the sources. It brings out in a very organized way. It'll take you through everything you need to know, all aspects of life that are affected by this middah of Yesod. It'll go into them and it'll teach you how to rectify it and take care of it and make sure you're on the right path. There's a lot to gain out of this book, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it should you pick it up and read it. I can leave a link also on the bottom of the video where you can find this book online to purchase. So there you have it. That was a review of Yesod Tzion on the topic of Shovavim. In it contained all the fundamentals you need to know to deal with a lot of your base natures, all the physicality of the world, and how to overcome desires and everything that's stifling your growth. Pick it up. There's time, but no time to waste. Thank you for joining us here on Bnei HaNeviim. We'll see you very soon.